It sucks to have to admit that there's just some games that aren't meant for this generation. Either they cost too much to make, or people just don't really like those games anymore. God of War was one of those games that got stuck with the last generation. They did really well, but they kind of tapped out that generation of that type of gameplay, the Devil May Cry kind of gameplay, and it kind of killed that entire genre for like the longest time until God of War came back and, of course, rebooted the series and redid the gameplay in order for it to fit in a modern audience's mind. And while those games were successful, they really did cost a lot of money to even make in the first place, with God of War and God of War Ragnarok costing around $100 million to $200 million. Now, in my heart, I was excited when they said they were going to give another crack at that Twisted Metal IP, considering the fact that Twisted Metal has a very successful show right now. It's really good, and if you haven't seen it, you should go see it. And I'm talking to myself here because I haven't had a chance to see it. Currently, it's really good. Season 2 is going to come out, and at the beginning of this generation, we were promised that a Twisted Metal was in the works from different studios trying to tackle it down, trying to make a live service Battle Royale game to it, which is where I think it's really hard to bring back a game like Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal would have to compete with other games that kind of do its genre in different ways, which is basically Fortnite, Apex, and all these other games. And to make my point clear that this is exactly what they were going for, they really described it as it had third-person shooter mechanics wrapped with third-person vehicle combat with the objective of being the last one standing. That's basically a live service battle royale, and it would cost so much money to try to create a game like that. Not only that, but to make that game profitable. Now, PlayStation's not known for making live service games, and when they do, it's from studios that they hired to make those type of games. Helldivers is a prime example of they did it in the previous generation in a smaller scale and then brought it up to a big scale and are kind of raking in the cash. But imagine trying to spend that kind of money on an IP like Twisted Metal. It really doesn't give you any kind of reason to invest money into this intellectual property, because of the fact that more than likely you're not going to get Helldivers 2 profit. If anything, there's a chance that this game might do what Concord did and completely blow $200 million and doesn't really bring in success. You see, PlayStation is really used to, and it's not just PlayStation, it's almost every single studio are used to the fact that if they're making a game, they want a hit. This is a dog-eat-dog world where if your game's not a hit and it's not selling at least 5 million copies to justify making another sequel to it, or for you to even exist at all as a studio, you have to make a game that makes at least 5 million copies from its first new IP, and from there you hope that that game is going to make 10 to 30 million copies or sell to 50 million copies or whatever. That is unfortunately the state of AAA gaming nowadays. It's why I say that AAA gaming is kind of in trouble, because there's a reason why Twisted Metal hasn't come out, and it's because they're trying to make it a AAA game. The truth of the matter is that when Twisted Metal was fun, it didn't have a giant budget. Look at these games. They weren't really high-end. They were just really fun games with really good soundtracks that really did something that we had never seen before. And of course, it was such a revolutionary game. It was by the same people who made God of War. Not the new ones, the Greek mythology ones. Those games were amazing, and it's made by the same mind with David Jaffe. If and when Twisted Metal ever comes back, it has to be made by somebody that is relatively not that big. A AA company that is just coming to try to make a good Twisted Metal game and not trying to make a hit is when Twisted Metal is gonna be fun. They tried to bring back Twisted Metal back in the PlayStation 4 days, and the reason why it did so horribly is because they were trying to fit a game that is a AA feeling into a AAA budget that was never going to make the money that they thought it was, especially when they brought it back at the time, and Twisted Metal's entire intellectual property wasn't really valued the way they wanted it to be. But if they ever do want to bring Twisted Metal back, I would so look forward to it. I think it would make a great Battle Royale game with car shooting mechanics that did the same thing that Battle Royale does, but with a Twisted Metal feel to it. It would work great, but unfortunately, I don't see Sony ever learning its lesson and giving this game to somebody that is a AA indie producer that could really make this game flourish. And unfortunately, Twisted Metal isn't the only game that has suffered this fate. We have seen many games that have suffered this fate of them not exactly being AAA games, so they're not gonna make AAA money. So they're stuck in purgatory forever until somebody gets the hint that these games are what they are. They're not what you're gonna want them to be. They're not gonna make money like these live service games do. They're gonna make money like the way single player games do. It's why that Red Dead Redemption sold like 30 million copies and they kind of forgot about that game completely because Grand Theft Auto Online was making so much more money. Which is why there's companies that are poisoned now to expect that out of all their games and overestimate themselves too much. So until companies understand that, like, yeah, not every game is going to bring you that type of profit, you shouldn't put a budget of $200 million on a game that you're not confident is going to make good money. And I don't blame you for doing that. Which is why there needs to be a push, again, I'm repeating myself, for AA indie titles that would come in and make this game or certain games that are stuck in purgatory. Is why we see so many intellectual properties that Sony has that they haven't touched in like the longest time. Like there's IP titles like that everywhere. Dino Crisis is one of them. And they're not gonna make those games because they're not confident that it's gonna make money like the way it used to in the past or in modern standards like the way some of these games do. Grand Theft Auto was one of those as well. It made, I think it's the most sold game of all time, and yet again they forgot about the single player game and only worked on the online portion of the game. Ignored Red Dead Redemption, kind of stopped doing video games altogether because GTA Online makes them almost $1 billion every single quarter. So it's like these games are stuck in purgatory for a reason, is because they're not going to make huge cash. That's the sad thing about it. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Which company do you think Twisted Metal would do a good job bringing them into the forefront and not making it cost like $200 million to do so? Let me know what you think below. And remember, you're pretty good.